Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. In this New Jersey-focused episode, we'll preview the crowded Democratic primary for governor, the less crowded but equally contentious Republican primary, and we'll look ahead to the general election this fall and why it matters to the rest of the country. And we'll do it all with special guest Madison Fernandez of Politico. Buckle up. I'm Jacob Rubashkin, Deputy Editor of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan analysis for more than 40 years. And this weekend, I am headed up to New York's 7th Congressional District, currently represented by Democrat Nydia Velázquez.
And I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, and I just got back from Louisiana's 2nd District, represented by Democrat Troy Carter, where I was speaking to a group from Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Orleans, right by the Superdome.
Nathan, did you get to go to the World War II Museum while you were there, by chance?
Unfortunately, I was there for a very short amount of time, but there is a giant mural at the airport about it, and it looks amazing. I mean, I want to come back, particularly with our family and my boys, because they love military history, war history, all of that. I think it would be a family hit, but I've never been. Have you been?
I have not, no, but I've heard that it is phenomenal. You know, one of the best kind of historical museums anywhere out there, certainly in the U.S.
Well, and the board, maybe it's just because it's from the museum, it says, number one tourist destination in New Orleans, which is a pretty big claim, but maybe that's just but I'm intrigued. It looks awesome. I hope to get there one day.
Yeah, I will say I did go to, as I was in New Orleans last year with my girlfriend, the Mardi Gras Warehouse Museum, which is one of the warehouses where they actually build the floats for Mardi Gras for the parade. And that was incredible. That was a ton of fun, seeing all the floats from the past years and decades in situ in the warehouse. So next time you're in New Orleans, if you have a minute there, that's also a little bit off the beaten path, but it's a good time.
Sounds like I need to schedule more than 6 hours awake on the ground, most of which I'm working. It does. Every time I go, it's been fun. I never get a chance to stay very long. So next time.
Before we get into it, what are some recent headlines that people shouldn't miss in congressional news?
So Democratic Congressman Jared Golden ended some of the suspense of the cycle by announcing his reelection in Maine's 2nd District rather than running for the Senate or governor. That likely sets up a competitive race for Golden against former Republican Governor Paul LePage. Democrats are still trying to secure a serious challenger to Senator Susan Collins, and there will be a competitive Democratic primary for governor.
In Virginia, Democrat Jerry Connolly died this morning after a battle with esophageal cancer. The 9-term congressman was a fixture in Northern Virginia politics in Fairfax County and then in Congress, and had risen to be the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. His death leaves Democrats at a 220 to 212 seat disadvantage in the House, following the deaths of 2 other Democratic members earlier this year. Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican in Virginia, has discretion on when to schedule a special election to replace Connolly, but historically and under the statute governing that, it does have to happen relatively quickly. So we'll see when that election takes place.
It's sadly remarkable that the last 8 members of Congress to pass away while in office have all been Democrats, going back almost 3 years. And that's quite a trend or a streak that inevitably will be broken, but it's pretty astounding.
Yeah.
Former state Senate Minority Leader Melissa Lopez Franson dropped out of the Minnesota Senate race, leaving Congresswoman Angie Craig and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan to battle for the DFL nomination to replace retiring Senator Tina Smith. Lopez Franson's former state Senate district was just north of Craig's congressional district, which is now open because she's running for the Senate. So we'll see what Lopez Franson does next.
And several state senators already running for that Craig seat, but could potentially attract more candidates there as well. In Illinois, Democratic Congresswoman Lauren Underwood is not going to run for Senate. She had been considering it pretty openly ever since Dick Durbin, the incumbent, said that he wasn't going to run for re-election. That means the primary field to succeed Durbin is likely set, with Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, and Congresswoman Robin Kelly as the three major candidates. And of course, whoever wins that Democratic primary is very likely to win the general election and be the next senator from Illinois. I want to welcome our special guest, Madison Fernandez. Madison is a reporter at Politico, where she covers the New Jersey gubernatorial race and previously wrote their great campaign newsletter, Morning Score. Before that, Madison was the editor-in-chief at the Ithacan, the college paper in Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York. Go Bombers. Madison, it is always great to have a former college newspaper editor on the show, let alone one from Ithaca. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And Ithaca is gorgeous, right?
I love that shirt. Even though I have no real connection to the region, it's an amazing slogan, I guess.
Well, we got to get you some of the more further afield ones. They've taken it and ran in all sorts of directions up there.
Okay.
Maybe one in heavy metal font. I don't know, Nathan.
Stay tuned.
Before we jump into our main topic of the day, though, Madison, you know the drill here. You got to tell us, what congressional district did you grow up in?
I grew up in New York 8. That is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And it's really exciting having a very notable member of Congress represent where I grew up, because I mean, when I say I'm from New York City, everyone just assumes that, it's like Manhattan, but I grew up in the burbs of Brooklyn, and it would literally take me like an hour and a half to get into the city where I went to high school, and no one would understand my plight, and no one would know the neighborhood I grew up in. So it's cool to have someone that's not a backbencher representing my neighborhood that literally no one knows when I tell them.
And talk about your growing up. Did you come from a political family, or someone who your family was in the media, or how did you get to being on this podcast right now?
Yeah, really not at all. And it's so funny because every time, I'm talking to my friends from high school or college, they're like, what is your job? You always said you didn't want to do political reporting. And I'm like, life just comes at you really fast. So it was really just something I sort of fell into, campaigns specifically. And I just think all the personalities are so fun. And I especially love covering down ballot because it's a lot of races that get overlooked, especially, in off years. I love off year elections. I love state leg elections. I love all that. And it's the stuff that I think really has an impact on people's lives, and they're not always paying attention to it. So those are my favorite to cover.
And what did you think you were going to be when you were in junior high? What did you think you were going to be doing for a living right now?
I knew I was going to be a reporter. It's because I'm so nosy and I love to find out things and tell people the things I know. But I really had no idea like what I wanted to cover. I think for a bit, I wanted to do like science journalism or environmental journalism. I actually minored in health policy with the goal of doing some health reporting, which you never know. You never know where life's going to take you. But right now, loving campaigns.
Primary day is fast approaching in New Jersey. On June 10th, Democratic voters will decide their nominee to succeed term-limited Governor Phil Murphy. It's been the most uncertain Democratic primary in decades, with 6 credible candidates in the running. Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Newark Mayor Ros Baraka, Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop, former State Senate President Steve Sweeney, and New Jersey Education Association President Sean Spiller. Now, the candidates, most of them, faced off in 2 debates over the past week. Let's take a brief listen to last week's NJ Spotlight News and WNYC debate.
Any legislation right now opens this up to attacks in our court system. We also know we have HAVA right now.
Absolutely.
It's a really good excuse if you understand our court system. If you understand the fact that HAVA is the U.S. attorney right now in our state, Steve, both of you. If you understand that HAVA is the U.S. attorney who is attacking people.
All right, listen, we're not going to be able to get through everything if everyone talks over each other. I understand, and I will come to you.
Madison, you've been covering this race for a while. With just a few weeks to go before Election Day, where do things stand in the Democratic primary?
I mean, like you said, it's really uncertain, which is weird at this point in a campaign. I mean, I've covered a lot of campaigns and usually someone pulls away from the pack. You know, some polling has Mikey Sherrill in the lead and some will say she's the front runner. But, you know, I've talked to a lot of people in New Jersey and there's a bit of a hesitancy when it comes to polling. You know, people argue that it's hard to model what the turnout is going to look like this year. Some are using 2017 as a good reference for turnout, but there's so many variables that have just changed since then. It's kind of difficult to really figure out who's going to pull ahead. And really, each of them have a viable path to victory. You know, whether you go geographically, if you go demographically, and we could break all of that down. But it's really it's really hard to tell who's in the lead right now.
What do you think is the most important? It doesn't seem like ideology necessarily, but geography, demographics. Which of those factors that you mentioned do you think is going to end up be the deciding one?
It really could be anything. I mean, if you're thinking about it geographically, Steve Sweeney is the only Southern Jersey candidate. So, you know, he and his allies will argue that all the other candidates will split the North and Central Jersey, if you think that's real, vote. I'm not getting into that one. But if you think about it a bit ideologically, in terms of the progressive lane, you have Raz Baraka, the Newark mayor, and then you have Stephen Fulop. And they're kind of grouped together, but it's been interesting lately because Baraka has been trying to position himself as the only progressive candidate, the one who's been steadfastly progressive, and implying that Fulop is progressive just for the sake of this campaign. Mikey, I think the congresswoman can pick up some progressive votes, pick up some more moderate votes. And then in terms of the more moderate candidates, you have Josh Gottheimer and Steve Sweeney. So I mean, I hate saying this, but it's going to come down to turnout and who can activate their base the most. And like I said, I think it's really an open question of that, given that it's an off year and just without the county line, which we can also get to, it's kind of changed, I think, how people are approaching the campaign.
Now, there's one candidate you didn't mention there, which I think I kind of want to get into here, and that's Sean Spiller, the teachers union president, who was not present at either of the 2 debates that happened in the past couple weeks because he didn't raise enough money. But at the same time, he's got this massive super PAC that's going to spend, $25-35 million on his behalf. Is he still in the mix here? Has his super PAC allies allowed him to remain a credible contender, even as he, is not raising any money on his own and is not even on the debate stage with these other 5 candidates?
Listen, I really think that everyone's in the mix. I think he's certainly on the bottom half if you're paying attention to polling, but he is still a viable candidate. I mean, like you said, he didn't raise enough money, but he has a super PAC that is funded primarily from the teachers union. And if you live in New Jersey, you have seen Sean Spiller's face. They have been throwing him on billboards, ads, mailers everywhere. And, I talked to some people and they're like, I don't want to see him anymore. So, I mean, it's also interesting in a way because for some of these candidates who have been campaigning for such a long time, there's a bit of voter fatigue. So I wonder if that's going to backfire. But anyway, all that being said, he has a super PAC that is really boosting him up. And I think for that reason that you shouldn't count him out.
In the past, since 2018, in Democratic primaries across the country, there has seemed to be certainly an appetite among primary voters to nominate women or candidates, minority candidates, candidates of color. Cheryl, in this race, do you see that as a particular advantage, or is there that same appetite, or what is maybe her liability as a candidate that we may not see from a beltway bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that her being the only woman in the field sets her apart when she's talking about things like abortion rights. She has that sort of, authenticity that comes with it a bit. And, she's also backed by Emily's List. They haven't, as far as I could tell, they haven't, started spending a lot in the primary, and it's unclear if they will. But historically, they've spent a lot of money for their candidates that they're backing. So, I mean, really, anything can happen in the last couple of weeks of the race. Honestly, I feel like I haven't heard from folks any concerns about having, a woman governor in the state. So I don't know if I necessarily see that as a liability. An interesting dynamic in this race so far in the primary has been that it's been a pretty cordial affair. I mean, I think that you're starting to see some attacks against the congresswoman because she is perceived as the front runner. For instance, Baraka just put up an attack ad, and so did Fullup's PAC this week. But it's kind of a bit of a fine line for these men that she's running against if they're attacking her. You don't want to be perceived as, oh, you're beating up on the only woman in the race. So I think that's part of the calculation with, what are the benefits of going after Cheryl at this point. But we are starting to see some attacks fly.
I'm curious, you mentioned kind of the campaign starting to train some fire on Cheryl, who like you said, has led in every single publicly available poll of this race, most of which have been campaign internals, but we've started to get some more kind of nonpartisan polling, and she's ahead in all of them, but never by a lot. That's not to say that there hasn't been a ton of money spent here, right? I mean, I think last I checked, there's been almost $60 million just from Democratic candidates spent on this race, most of that coming from Gottheimer, Fullup, and Spiller's camps. And those are three guys who don't seem to be moving very much in the polls. Are you surprised with how static things have been since the beginning of this race, with Cheryl in holding a tenuous lead and the other candidates kind of bunched up behind her, despite the fact that we've seen so much spending on TV and in mailboxes?
A note on the money spent. You also have to remember what market New Jersey is in. It's two of the most expensive media markets, Philly and New York. So even if you are pouring in a bunch of money, it's like, are you really reaching as many people as if you were in like the Midwest? No, you're not. So having covered a lot of campaigns, like I said, it is really interesting to me how there hasn't really been anyone that's pulled away at this point. And the way that everyone's trying to really differentiate themselves, a lot of them are rolling out all of these plans about, affordability, housing, stuff like that. The reality is, I'm not sure how much primary voters are focusing on plans like these. I think that a lot of folks vote off of bio, which is definitely the congresswoman's bet right now. She really leans into the fact that she was a Navy helicopter pilot, even to the point where, her opponents are, they kind of chastise her they're like, that's all you talk about. And she keeps making that point because that's what makes her stand out from everyone else. Fulop has a little bit of a different perspective with this. He likes to argue that he's the most policy-focused candidate, has the most intricate laid out plans. And, we're just going to have to wait to see if the electorate is paying more attention to bio or these policy plans.
And we should have said at the outset that this nomination is critical because New Jersey is still a Democratic-leaning state, and so being the Democratic nominee is important. And I wonder if there's some reticence from the other candidates, the non-Congresswoman Cheryl candidates, to attack her, because in a very crowded race, if you are able to bring her support down, there's no guarantee that you are going to be the one that benefits, right? You might end up helping one of your opponents. And so that's probably part of the struggle. But Madison, before we move on to the Republicans in the general election, talk about Mayor Baraka and the arrest or the situation at the detention facility and how that impacts the race.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor Baraka has certainly gotten a lot of free media off of this. But I mean, immigration has been a really big issue on both the Democratic and Republican sides in the primary. Most of the candidates for the Dems are in support of maintaining sanctuary state status and are in support of local laws that back that, with the exception of Steve Sweeney. But for Baraka, it's really been front and center for him because of Delaney Hall, which is the new immigrant detention facility in Newark. So it's in his backyard. He's been going there and protesting its opening. His main argument is that the facility didn't have the proper permits to open. So, he's been showing up. I've covered, one of the protests that he took part in prior to his arrest there. And, clips from that event show up in his campaign ads. So it's definitely something that he thinks helps set him apart, because it shows and helps him with the argument that he is the one who is really standing up the most to Trump, whereas everyone is just sort of saying it and not necessarily, backing up their words. I think his arrest definitely helps boost some of those progressive arguments he's making. And for some progressive voters who might have been on the fence between, let's say, him and Fulop, that could help sway them towards him. But it might, if he makes it through the primary, it might end up coming to hurt him in the general. I mean, you can be certain that whoever the Republican nominee is gonna say, oh, look, this Democrat is supporting illegal immigrants, and everything that Republicans nationally have been saying about this. So I think, honestly, I don't know if it won him the primary. There are probably some moderate voters who have immigration stances that don't necessarily align with him that didn't help him. But in the general, I think that it could be used as an attack.
The picture on the other side of the aisle in New Jersey is a little more clear. Jack Ciattarelli, the former state senator who was the Republican nominee for governor in 2021, is the favorite in this primary, but he still has to get past radio host Bill Spadea and State Senator John Bramnick in the primary. Let's take a brief listen to last night's debate between those three candidates.
The first job of any candidate and elected official is to listen. To listen is to affirm the dignity of someone else who may oppose you. To listen is to affirm respect for the person who may oppose you. One thing he has never done in his 10 years on the radio is listen. He has hung up on people that had a contrary position. He has talked over people that disagreed with him, and he's cut them off if they were Jack Ciattarelli supporters. I get the sense you disagree with the president's decision to endorse me. I get the sense you disagree with him on that, too. But
I was disappointed. Yeah. I make no bones about that. You know what? No, but again, he endorsed a poll, not a plan. Mm-hmm.
Jack Ciattarelli, you still have 30 seconds.
More spin from the radio host.
Madison, what has been the main theme of this Republican primary?
Who loves the president more? I mean, really, this whole entire race has just been who will be President Trump's strongest ally in the state, and mostly between Jack Ciattarelli and Bill Spadea. John Bramnick actually is more of a moderate Republican. He has very vocally not been a huge fan of Trump. And I mean, his argument is that for that reason, he is the strongest contender in a general election, which may be true. I mean, Democrats are already seizing on the fact that Ciattarelli and Spadea have been fighting for the Trump endorsement pretty much this entire primary. And in a state that, like we said before, is still blue leaning, it really is, it could be a vulnerability. I will also say that Republicans are feeling really hot after November. I mean, Trump only lost the state by around 6 points, which was a really big improvement from his past showings in the state. So a lot of Republicans that I talk with are pointing to that momentum and arguing that, November is within reach to flip. So, I mean, I still view New Jersey as blue leaning, but I definitely think it's going to be a tough fight for whoever the Democrat is.
And Ciattarelli has had a pretty interesting evolution on Trump. This is the third time that he's run for governor, right? He ran in 2017. He lost to Kim Guadagno in the primary there. At that point, I think he said he didn't vote for Trump in 2016. He called him a charlatan, and he really wanted nothing to do with him. In 2021, he didn't really want to talk about Trump at all. He said, Phil Murphy wants to make this race about Trump. I want to make it about New Jersey, or something to that effect. And now, 8 years into this process, here he is trumpeting the Trump endorsement, if he wins the primary, it's going to be in general election ads. Do voters buy it? I mean, what do you make of Ciattarelli's evolution on Trump over the last decade? And now that he has the endorsement, is everything else kind of water under the bridge for him and the president?
Mm-hmm. Well, Spadea supporters definitely don't buy it. And I mean, even if you watched the debate last night and in the aftermath of the Trump endorsement, I mean, Spadea keeps saying that Trump only endorsed a poll. He didn't endorse a plan. And I mean, obviously social media is not everything, but I think it's so unique for Spadea because he has such a loyal online following. So, I'm looking through social media, and like all of his supporters' comments are, well, Trump was wrong. Trump's not always right. Like, they point to Trump's endorsement in the Senate race last year. He backed the candidate who ultimately lost in the primary. And they're arguing that this is the same situation, that you have people saying still with Bill. So I think that just because Ciattarelli got the endorsement, I definitely do think it helps, but I don't think everyone is necessarily sold because of the way he acted in the past. But you'll also notice that Ciattarelli's reasoning for that is, well, look at JD Vance. He wasn't always the most loyal Trump supporter, but I mean, the way the Republican Party is going these days, most people come back around. And I mean, the reality is, I think Bramnick has a pretty tough road to the nomination, in part because he is not a vocal Trump supporter.
We talked briefly about the lack of the party line system in the Democratic side being a real reason for uncertainty there. The first primary in decades without the party line system. Is the party line system also gone now on the Republican side as well? I know the initial court decision that Andy Kim brought was just about the Democrats, but is there a party line system still in the Republicans, or are we full and clear away from that system in both parties now?
Yeah, there's no line this year. And for those who might not be familiar, pretty much the party line gave candidates who are backed by a county party a better spot on the ballot. And, for people just voting really quickly who aren't like super paying attention, they see the top spot in like bold or underlined or whatever, and they'll just mark that off. So the general thought was, if you got the county line, like, you were going to win previously. So that's not the case this year. And I alluded to this before, but I think it changed the way that people campaigned in a sense. So for instance, on the Republican side, Chitterelli still competed in all of the county nominating conventions, but Spadia didn't go to most of them because his argument was, well, I'm just going to take my voice directly to the voters because the voters matter, not the party bosses. So, he's trying to go with this anti-establishment sort of playbook. So yes, there's no line. And I think that a big question that's been surrounding this primary on both sides is, so do county endorsements matter? I think in some counties there are definitely benefits because you get those extra on the ground resources. But the reality is not all the parties are really offering that much that much extra. So I think it just sort of depends, which ones you're counting on.
Yeah.
That dynamic, Madison, that you were talking about earlier about the embrace of Trump, even though there's the political leanings of New Jersey. It's interesting, right? That when there's a Republican primary in a Republican state, it's natural. All right, who can be the closest to Trump? Maybe in a swing state, but New Jersey isn't even really a swing state. But yet, I think the candidates both realize how important Trump's endorsement is, but they feel like voters nationwide have given the president and the Republican Congress this mandate, and there might be a cold reality in November of this year about what New Jersey really thinks about President Trump and what he's doing. But this is not, I say, not normal. It's not normal, I think, for the candidates to go so far toward the president when the state is not a Republican or swing state.
Absolutely. And I mean, in recent history in Jersey, it's been pretty untested. I mean, the Republicans you've had running statewide have been relatively moderate or more less to the right of the party. And yeah, I don't know how it's going to play out in November. And I'm interested to see if Chitterelli is the nominee, how he straddles that line. I mean, is he going to walk stuff back again? Then you open yourself up to the risk of, being called even more of a flip-flopper. Or is he really going to lean into Trump, which I'm sure the Dems would want him to do.
Well, that brings us to our final topic of the day, which is, of course, the general election. These primaries are not the end of the story. The two winners of the primaries are going to face each other in November in what is going to be one of the most closely watched races of this off year. It's one of two gubernatorial races taking place in 2025, the other, of course, being in Virginia. Madison, why should we care about what happens in the gubernatorial race in New Jersey?
Whether you like it or not, political observers are going to say that this is the bellwether for the midterms, which, in some ways, sure. But I think it's also sometimes little apples to oranges with governor's races and congressional races. So that's just my sort of caveat. But beyond that, sort of what we were saying with the sort of embrace of Trump. I mean, New Jersey, like I said, is a state where Trump made gains last year. So I think it's a really big question of, is that just because Trump is on the ballot, or is it something bigger and broader within the Republican Party? Are these independents choosing to vote for a Republican? Are some of these Democrats switching to vote for a Republican? I mean, part of Trump's gains last year had to do specifically with voters of color, Hispanic voters, and a lot of his economic message. So is that something that can be replicated? Republicans sure are gonna try.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big question that all of us are asking ourselves heading into 2026 is, can Republicans recreate and motivate the Trump coalition as it currently stands to show up when Trump isn't on the ballot? And that's a question that applies everywhere we look. It doesn't, it's not a New Jersey or Virginia specific question, but these will be the best examples. And especially now that we have, for the first time, really that we've had governor's races in either of those states in the Trump era. We're going to have what looks like two nominees that have tied themselves closely to Trump, right? Whether it's Ciattarelli or Spadia, both of them have bear hugged Trump in this primary. Winsome Sears, the Republican nominee in Virginia, also a big Trump supporter. That's a real difference from 2021 when Ciattarelli kept his distance, Glenn Youngkin kept his distance. 2017, where you had kind of old school Republican Ed Gillespie, you had Kim Guadagno, who was a Christie person, not a Trump person. So this is the first time that I think that we're getting kind of the best test in these states of, can a really Trump aligned candidate hold together the coalition? New Jersey and Virginia essentially voted the same way in the presidential election this past cycle, which certainly caught me by surprise. But like you said, Trump did so much better in New Jersey, and he did a little bit better in Virginia. So they were both around that 6-point margin. And I'm going to be very curious to see, what does turnout look like among Republicans, among lower propensity voters that powered Trump to victory last year, but may not show up in an off year election.
The other thing that I'll say that's important about New Jersey is that if Ciattarelli is the Republican nominee, you have to keep in mind that when he ran against Phil Murphy in 21, he almost beat him. I mean, he came very unexpectedly, narrowly close to winning that. So I think that part of that is he knows how to run a general election campaign, and Democrats will even agree he ran a really good campaign. But does that change with the Trump factor now?
I remember 4 years ago in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, I think President Trump said he was willing to do a rally for Youngkin. Youngkin's like, how about a teletown hall? let's not go too far. But you're both right. The margin, I think the margin is going to be the story, right? I mean, if Ciattarelli or Republicans win this race, I mean, it will be a shocker, and Democrats are even further in the wilderness politically than what they feel like they are now. And I'll even say the same thing for Virginia. But yeah, let's watch the margin and see how it compares to that 2024 result. And if Democrats win, I already know what Republicans are going to say. They're going to say, well, New Jersey and Virginia, they're Democratic states, or they'll blame their nominees. Their nominees didn't run good campaigns and everything. And there might be pieces of that truth in that, but there are probably going to be some lessons about turnout and motivating voters and persuading voters ahead of next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially in New Jersey, you have a couple of competitive House districts.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And where the margin comes from. I mean, Madison, you mentioned the gains that Trump made among Hispanic and Latino voters, looking specifically at, a place like Passaic County that I think Biden carried by 20 points in 2020, and Trump won in 2024. And that was a county that Phil Murphy did okay in 2021, even as he was, coming very closer than Harris came to losing the state. So the shifts under the hood as well, I think, will tell us something about the durability of the Republican message. And not to put the cart before the horse here, but I also happen to think, certainly if Mikey Sherrill is the Democratic nominee, she's going to get a lot of national face time out of being the nominee here. I think the Democratic Party is looking for leaders at this moment, and a few figures have kind of tried to step into that gap and been successful at it. I think these two blockbuster races in New Jersey and Virginia are going to give both of those Democratic nominees an incredible platform to step up and become a more prominent leader in their party. I think that's true of Abigail Spanberger, and I think certainly would be true of Mikey Sherrill, just because of where Democratic voters are in general. But whether it's Ross Baraka or Steve Fulop or Josh Gottheimer or whomever, that person is going to become a face of the Democratic Party overnight for the last 6 months of the year, and that could have national implications as well.
Mm-hmm. And just one note on that. I mean, like I said before, the entire Democratic primary has been very centered around who's going to be the strongest person to stand up to Trump. I'm interested if that message is going to remain in the general. I do think that in a Democratic leaning state, probably. But if it is going to be as close as we think it's going to be, and you want to get some of those independents who, again, might like Trump, I don't know if Dems are going to have to temper that back a bit. But I guess we'll have to see who the nominee is.
And now for our final segment, Look What I Found. This is where we talk about anything new that we've been into, books, movies, food, TV. It can really be anything. It's usually not political. Jacob, what did you find?
So I am really enjoying a podcast called What Went Wrong, which is all about troubled movie productions. Every episode, the two hosts take a movie and they do a deep dive on the production from, the conception of the idea all the way to distribution and the rollout of the film. And they focus on movies that have particularly troubled or difficult productions like Gladiator or Mad Max Fury Road or things like that. I almost exclusively listen to non-political podcasts. This one excluded, of course. But I really try and gravitate toward things about movies, music, culture. And so What Went Wrong has been a great addition to that rotation. They do a really good job. They're very knowledgeable hosts, and they have been around for a while. So if you're just getting into it, they have a tremendous back catalog of movies that you can sift through and listen to all the crazy fist fights and production delays and $1 million budget overruns that have plagued some of your favorite films.
So is it funny or is it serious? What's the tone? What is the tone of?
They're pretty light. They're pretty lighthearted. I wouldn't say that there's not spooky music. There's not, it's not like the true crime of troubled movie productions. They're pretty lighthearted about it. They also do really interesting interviews with, they call them below the line positions on a film, which are kind of the working class of the film production, not the top actors or writers or producers, but like the armorers or the grips or, the different kind of production roles that are integral to the process, but don't get nearly as much glory. So I'm a big fan.
Okay. Madison, what did you find?
So I really love going to see musical. Everyone's like, "Oh, are you a theater kid?" The answer is no. I can't act, I can't sing, but I love watching them. So my favorite musical as of late that I saw a couple weeks ago is Maybe Happy Ending. It's nominated for a Tony, and I don't want to spoil it because it's just, I went in like pretty blind about the concept, and it is just so beautiful. Love the soundtrack. I just keep listening to it over and over. I cried when I saw it. So if you are in New York or in the New York area, you should totally go see it.
So Jacob knows that I am culturally challenged. Madison, give me even a little bit about what this musical is even about.
It's about two robots, and one, her charger is broken, so she is going to not survive. And then she asks the other robot for his charger, and then they go on an adventure and maybe fall in love.
Okay. This is not a Star Wars movie, though. These aren't
No.
Okay. All right. That might have had an appeal. Okay. I know
Nathan,
you don't want to spoil it.
What was the last musical that you watched, Nathan?
Well, I watched Hello, Dolly 5 times because my daughter was in the production.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I knew nothing until she auditioned. Before the audition, I knew nothing about Hello, Dolly, and I love it. Like I still wasn't tired of it, and so I know that doesn't fit neatly with what I found, which was I found someone willing to help me create Inside Elections shirts and merchandise with a metal font. These actually are available. I'll put the link in the tab. But you can buy an Inside Elections shirt that is in a death metal font, and it's pretty amazing. I think it's going to reach we could sell tens of these, I think, is really what we could do. But my college friends, they're into it. They're on board. But so yeah, Hello Dolly, death metal font. This is where I live, Madison. This is it.
Awesome.
But more to come on. We are. I feel like we're going to get in the T-shirt game. This is going to be. People are going to love it. I have other ideas that are probably questionable, but we're going to do it.
A department store with a side hustle as a political newsletter.
Exactly. Nonpartisan shirts, data, and analysis. Like that's what we're going to. But you can get mugs. It's a whole thing. But well, anyway, Madison, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and everyone needs to follow Madison on social media. We'll put her X profile in the links as well. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Go to InsideElections.com to subscribe to the bi-weekly newsletter. We've got individual subscriptions and group packages that are tailored for association and corporate PACs. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and rate us on your favorite platform. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you didn't like today's episode, please email Chris Christie. We also wanted to thank our producers Alan Tuzinski and Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts, and associate producer Conrad Tolosa. Please come back and join us next time.